All right, everybody, buckle up because what I'm about to share with you from last night's SportsCenter is the kind of insider information that could literally determine the outcome of Sunday's Raiders-Bears matchup. And I'm not exaggerating even a little bit here. So I'm watching the broadcast, right? And they bring on this massive cross-team analysis segment where they had Mitchell Renz from the Raiders coverage sitting down with Harrison Graham, who covers the Bears every single day. And the entire premise was brilliant. Tell us 5 things the Bears absolutely do not want the Raiders to know heading into Week 4. And let me tell you, what came out of that conversation was absolutely explosive. This wasn't your typical surface-level game preview nonsense. This was legitimate intel, the kind of stuff that coaching staffs spend hours trying to identify in film sessions. And it was all laid out right there on SportsCenter for everyone to see. Hey everyone! Real quick before I dive into the explosive details of this conversation, if you're enjoying this type of exclusive content, my dream is to hit 1,000 subscribers on this channel. I work really hard to bring these high-level analyses that nobody else is doing. So, subscribe now, hit that notification bell, and let's go on this journey together. It's just 2 seconds, but it makes all the difference in helping me achieve this dream. All right, now hold on tight, because here comes the bomb! Let me tell you exactly what went down in this conversation. Now, before I dive into the specifics, the panel made this crucial point that I think frames everything perfectly. They were saying, look, we make decisions every day as fans. We think we know what teams should do. And sometimes you genuinely have to wonder if the fan base understands the players better than the actual coaches do. And that question was hanging over this entire segment because the insights that came out were so obvious once you heard them. Yet you wonder if Pete Carroll, Chip Kelly, and Brennan Carroll are actually seeing these same weaknesses. The analysts weren't holding back either. They made it clear that this is a must-win situation for the Raiders. And if they can't exploit what the Bears are giving them, there are going to be serious questions about this coaching staff's ability to prepare and adapt. So let's get into the actual secret. And I'm telling you, the first one that Harrison revealed had the entire SportsCenter panel practically jumping out of their seats. The number one concern for the Bears heading into this game is their weak defensive line. Now, when you hear that, especially if you're a Raiders fan, you should be thanking every deity you can think of because this is exactly the kind of matchup advantage that can define a game. Harrison explained that Chicago has been absolutely struggling against the run all season long. They've been getting gashed on the ground. They haven't been able to generate consistent pressure on opposing quarterbacks. And the numbers back this up in a devastating way. The show pulled up the stat, and here's what they showed. The Bears have only 5 sacks this entire season. 5. That's tied for 27th in the entire National Football League. The analysts were breaking this down, explaining what this means strategically for the Raiders. If you give Gardner Minshew more time in the pocket, if you give Chip Kelly's offense just a little bit more breathing room, it's going to open up the entire playbook. They referenced what we saw Gardner do in that Commanders game near the end of the matchup. And, yeah, some of those were garbage time points, but the efficiency was there. They also brought up the New England Patriots game in Week 1, showing how when Gardner has time, he can absolutely pick apart a defense. Now, let's talk about the personnel on Chicago's defensive line, because this matters. The SportsCenter crew went through the roster, and they kept coming back to Grady Jarrett, who's getting up there in age, and Montez Sweat, who's talented but inconsistent. But the overarching theme was their inability to consistently win in the trenches. And this is where the analysis got really tactical. The panel emphasized that this is a monumental game not just for the Raiders' offensive line as a unit, but specifically for this coaching staff's credibility. One of the analysts said something that really stuck with me. If you can't run the ball effectively against Chicago, you're going to have serious problems all season long. And the implication was clear. If the Raiders can't dominate this matchup, the calls for JPJ at center instead of Jordan Meredith are only going to get louder and more intense. Then they moved to secret number 2. And this is where the segment got absolutely fascinating, because it wasn't just about scheme or talent. It was about physicality and identity. Harrison told the panel that he's genuinely worried about Zamir White's physicality, and the way he explained it was perfect. He said teams take on the identities of their leaders, and right now, the Chicago Bears look like a soft football team. Now, to be fair, as the SportsCenter analysts pointed out, the Raiders have also looked soft at times this season, so this becomes a battle of who can impose their will more effectively. But then they dove into Zamir White's advanced metrics, and holy hell, these numbers were impressive. The show put up this graphic showing that White has 5 carries of 10-plus yards this season, which ranks 3rd in the entire NFL. He's 4th in the league with 13 missed tackles forced. He's 11th in yards per carry attempt. And here's the stat that really jumped off the screen. He's 1st in the NFL in yards after contact based on his total rushing yards. This kid is an absolute battering ram when he gets going. Now flip that over to what Chicago's defense has been allowing, and the contrast becomes staggering. The Bears are giving up 139.3 rushing yards per game, which ranks 26th in the NFL. But here's the truly damning statistic. They're allowing 5 yards per carry, 31st in the entire league. The analysts were emphatic about this. If you're allowing 5.5 yards per carry, you cannot stop the run, period. End of story. Harrison kept repeating this phrase throughout the segment. You cannot let this be the Zamir White breakout game. He must have said it 4 or 5 times, and the way he said it, you could tell he genuinely believes the Bears coaching staff is terrified of exactly that scenario happening. The SportsCenter panel then started strategizing what the Raiders should do with this information. And I thought this was the most valuable part of the entire analysis. They were saying the Raiders need to commit to the running game and stick with it even if the first few carries don't pop off immediately. Stay physical, keep pounding the rock, because eventually that Bears defensive line is going to break. One analyst posed this question that I thought was brilliant. How many carries does Zamir White need to get on Sunday? And they threw out different numbers, debating back and forth, before settling on 20 carries as the magic number. The reasoning was simple. If you can't run effectively against the Chicago Bears with 20 attempts, you better be prepared to explain to your fan base why your offensive line construction isn't working. But there was another layer to this that the show explored, and it had to do with play calling and scheme. The analysts pulled up footage showing that when the Raiders have run outside zone plays this season, they're averaging almost 8 yards per carry. 8 yards! That's an absolutely absurd number, and it raises the question of why they're not featuring that play more prominently. The panel was practically begging Chip Kelly to watch the film and recognize this tendency, to lean into what's working rather than getting too cute with the play calling. Then the segment shifted to the defensive side of the ball, and this is where things got really interesting from a matchup perspective. Harrison's third major concern was Max Crosby going up against Chicago's offensive tackles, and the way he framed it was telling. He said he's really only worried about Max Crosby specifically, not the Raiders' pass rush as a whole. Malcolm Kuntz has been terrible according to the film they showed. Tyree Wilson isn't being utilized correctly in their defensive scheme. And outside of guys like Jonah Laulu and Thomas Booker, the defensive tackles have been struggling with consistency. But Max Crosby? This is the guy who should be salivating at this matchup. The SportsCenter crew pulled up his statistics. 2 sacks on the season, though the analysts argued he should have 3 or maybe even 4, based on plays where he was credited with pressures, but not sacks. They showed clips where he should have had a forced fumble, where he should have had an extra tackle for loss. He's been the focal point of this defense, the heart and soul, and against Chicago's tackles, he should absolutely dominate. Here's where the intel got specific and actionable. Braxton Jones, the left tackle for Chicago, has allowed 2 sacks this season, which ranks 86th in the NFL. He's allowed 13 pressures, ranking 96th. These aren't just bad numbers. These are "you're getting your quarterback killed" numbers. Their right tackle Darnell Wright is listed as questionable for the game, and if he can't go, they're going to be starting a rookie named Amarius Mim, who they drafted 56th overall in the 2nd round. The panel was unanimous on this. If you're a rookie tackle and your first major assignment is going up against Max Crosby over and over and over again, you're in for an absolutely brutal afternoon. One stat the show highlighted was particularly damning for Chicago. The Bears didn't allow a sack in their win earlier this season, but the 6 sacks they've allowed came in both of their losses. The correlation was obvious. When you can get pressure on their quarterback, the Bears lose game. They invested massive money this offseason in Joe Noteboom, Coleman Shelton, and other offensive line pieces, but the results haven't been there. The analysts kept coming back to this phrase, tackle the tackle. Whether it's Wright, whether it's Mims, whether it's Jones, Patrick Graham needs to scheme up opportunities for Max Crosby to win those one-on-one battles. Now, here's where the SportsCenter segment addressed something that isn't really a secret, but needed to be discussed. Brock Bowers. Everybody on the planet knows this kid is special. He's been one of the most impressive rookie tight ends we've seen in years. But here's what made this part of the discussion so compelling. Harrison and the analysts were talking about how Bowers clearly isn't 100% healthy right now. You can see it in the way he's moving, in how the Raiders are using him. And with Michael Mayer banged up and unlikely to play much, if at all, it becomes even more critical to use Bowers properly and get him involved despite not being at full strength. The panel made this argument that I thought was absolutely correct. Brock Bowers, at 75% health, is still a tight end that needs 8 to 10 targets in this football game. Why? Because when tight ends have been targeted against Chicago this season, the numbers are staggering. 27 targets, 24 catches. That's the most tight end receptions allowed in the NFL to that position. Harrison was brutally honest on the broadcast. He said straight up, "I don't think we have anybody who can cover Brock Bowers." Most NFL teams would say that about elite tight ends, but for it to be such a glaring mismatch makes it an absolute focal point for the Raiders' offense. The analysts identified Jaquan Brisker as the likely defender who'd be tasked with covering Bowers most often. He's a safety, talented player out of Penn State, but his PFF coverage grade this season is only 58.4, which is decidedly below average. The SportsCenter crew was emphatic. Chip Kelly and Gardner Minshew need to work Bowers early and often, especially in the red zone, especially on third downs when you need to move the chains. If he's in one-on-one coverage, you attack that matchup relentlessly. Then the segment moved to the final secret, and this one was all about psychology and environment. Caleb Williams on the road. The way Harrison explained this was fascinating because it wasn't just about road versus home splits. It was about how this young quarterback responds to adversity and pressure. When Caleb Williams has his confidence and everything's clicking, he looks like a franchise quarterback, someone who can make every throw, someone who can elevate the players around him. But when you get in his head and rattle him, and it's easier to rattle him in hostile environments, he looks like a completely different player. Here's where the practical reality of this game becomes crucial. The Raiders-Bears matchup in Las Vegas is probably going to be split close to 50-50 in terms of fan representation. Half the stadium will be Bears fans who made the trip, half will be Raiders faithful. But the SportsCenter analysts made this plea directly to Raiders fans. If you're going to this game, you need to be loud. You need to make it uncomfortable for Caleb Williams. You need to sound like you're coaching the damn game yourself by the time it's over. Because when you can disrupt Williams' rhythm and confidence, everything changes. The statistics they showed told the story perfectly. Caleb Williams is 1-8 on the road in his career. Both of Chicago's losses this season have come on the road. His road quarterback rating as a rookie was 80.8. His road QBR this year is 91.9 compared to 115 at home. These aren't marginal differences. These are massive splits that indicate a player who genuinely struggles in hostile environments. One analyst compared him to Justin Herbert, saying, "You can't deny the talent, but when things start going wrong mentally, it spirals really quickly." The show wrapped up with predictions, and this is where the energy in the studio got really interesting. The over-under for the game is 48.5 points, and the line has been bouncing all over the place. At various points, the Bears have been 3-point favorites, 1.5-point favorite. The Raiders have been 1.5-point favorite. The line keeps shifting, especially based on injury reports for those Chicago offensive tackles. The SportsCenter panel was unanimous, though, in expecting a high-scoring affair, and their consensus prediction was Raiders winning 27-24 in a game that comes down to the final possession. But here's what really stuck with me from the entire segment, and this is what the analysts kept coming back to. This game is entirely about execution for the Raiders. The Bears have given them the blueprint. They've shown exactly where they're vulnerable. Weak defensive line, soft run defense, suspect offensive tackles, tight end coverage issues, a rookie quarterback who struggles on the road. All of these are exploitable weaknesses. The question isn't whether the Raiders can win this game. The question is whether they will execute the game plan necessary to win. One analyst said something at the very end that I think perfectly encapsulates the stakes. If the Raiders lose this game after receiving this much quality intelligence about Chicago's weaknesses, there need to be serious questions asked about this coaching staff's ability to prepare and adapt. That's the bottom line. This isn't about talent deficiency. This is about recognition, preparation, and execution. The Raiders have every tool they need to dominate this matchup. Now they just have to go out and do it.